want me to promote him?
Yes, please.
Great. All right. Good evening and welcome everyone to this September 28th, 2020 City Council work session. Thank you for joining us in this remote meeting format. I apologize, we're starting a little late because everybody seemed to have trouble logging in today. In response to Governor Brown's Stay Home, Save Lives order, this format enables the City Council to meet and take care of business while keeping its members, staff, and the public safe. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling in to one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast materials webpage. Looking ahead, tonight's regular meeting will include a public forum. Information about how to participate in this meeting is available on the public webcast and meeting materials webpage. And as always, other avenues of communication with me and city councilors are available, including email and voicemail. And thank you all for tuning in. And with that, I will turn it over to the city manager for our first item of business.
Yeah, thank you. I think our first item is commercial setbacks, and Terry Harding and Chad Kramer have a presentation for that.
Good evening. Good job, everybody logging on. It's nice to see you all. My name is Terry Harding. I'm the principal planner for the Community Planning and Design team in the Planning and Development Department. And I'm joined by Chad Kramer, an urban designer on our team, to discuss commercial setbacks and urban design tools this evening that can help shape our city and implement our community vision. In a previous work session that you might recall requested by Councilor Zelenka, Council began a conversation about setbacks with the intent of creating vibrant streetscapes and a walkable pedestrian environment. In that discussion, Council expressed concern with the current setback standards that allow for buildings to have spaces built right next to the sidewalk, as this creates an uncomfortable environment for both pedestrians and people in the buildings. Council stated a desire for a solution that creates a healthier, more vibrant and pedestrian-friendly community while providing certainty and avoiding undue costs to development. In today's presentation, we'll discuss how the design, size, and relationships between different buildings and public spaces can be regulated by our code in a way that creates a welcoming environment for all. As you all know, the Envision Eugene process resulted in a community-wide vision that includes the 7 pillars and focuses on redevelopment in our downtown and along key corridors. The downtown is our ultimate 20-minute neighborhood, our economic and civic center, and the heart of our community. Here are some of the plans that support the community's vision for Eugene. All of the policies and goals within the plans shown here support our community's vision and align with the things we'll be discussing today. The comprehensive plan contains our growth management policies. The TSP, or Transportation System Plan, contains our transportation goals and policies, including tripling non-drive alone trips, a major component of our climate action plan. And the Urban Form Plan and Community Design Handbook here on the right are aspirational publications that illustrate how our city is intended to take shape over time. One policy in particular calls attention to the importance of urban design tools in shaping our experience. The Downtown Plan's Safe Civic Center policy. It speaks of the actual and perceived safety of the downtown environment. You can get every single other one of the policies implemented correctly, but if people's perceptions are off, our city won't thrive to its potential. We're going to be looking at a couple of urban design principles that will help us move from the policies and aspirations to built outcomes that contribute to walkability, livability, and the positive perception of our environment. In the next series of slides, Chad will walk through some urban design principles, tools, and next steps with the end goal of aligning our code standards with our expectations for the built environment.
Thank you, Terry, and good evening, everyone. I'd like to take a quick moment, if I can, to thank Councilor Zelenka for bringing this up with us. I'm an urban designer, and creating walkable and livable and happy city is what my passion is. And so having these kind of discussions, I think, is really great. So I thought I'd share something with you I think is really interesting. It's an urban design theory. I hope you enjoy it too. It's called the theory of prospect and refuge. And the theory of prospect and refuge seeks to describe why certain environments feel or are perceived to be secure and thereby meet basic human psychological needs. You can see here, human aesthetic preferences are based on perceptions that are evolved for survival. Our instincts suggest that we are preconceived to seek out environments where we can see but not be seen. So if you look at this image here, you see the couple on the bench, and they're kind of in a protected place. The bench has a back there. They're next to a tree. There's limbs over them, and they're looking out, kind of surveying the prospect area. So I ask you to consider these two images for a moment. I think most people inherently sense the similarities between them and feel comforted by imagining surveying the prospect area, the city and street life, while comfortable and safe from a place of refuge. And in this case, it's that porch. See, refuges or transition spaces help accomplish that psychological safety we find comfortable in great urban environments. Transition spaces link and buffer the inside to and from the outside. That's kind of the magic of them. They do both. The way that people interact with the urban environment is far more complex than who owns which piece of property and where the right-of-way starts and stops. So if we only consider the public realm, this is what we would see. But if we consider commercial uses to be extensions of the public realm, we begin to see that experientially people move freely between the public realm and places open for business. This is really desirable, obviously, as it reinforces the walkability and accessibility of businesses and services that are trying to get people to come into the doors to shop and dine and just generally just enjoy the downtown. As you can imagine, though, this condition is less desirable if you or someone else happens to live in that space, people just wandering in. So for residences, cue the transition space. They can take many forms. Usually we see them as raised stoops or porches or balconies, and they're a hybrid space. They're technically private and separated from the public realm, but able to interact with it. Think about your friend in the Holt Plaza who has balcony seats. You're technically separated, but you can wave and smile at each other, and the availability of that interaction while separated creates residential streetscape conditions that support livability and safety by providing those eyes on the street. The result is a condition that allows residences to have the actual and perceived safety and the physical and psychological benefits that come with it. Meanwhile, bustling citygoers, they don't feel creepy because, you're walking next to someone's bedroom while you're just trying to go to a dinner and a show, right? Everybody wins. So what does this look like in the real world? I like to think of streetscapes as an orchestra with individual streetscape components as individual instruments coming together to either create beautiful music or terrible music. So for a moment, let's just look at the instruments and not the players. So for our part, the city is generally responsible for the actual street part of the streetscape, which is about half of this orchestra. Travel lanes, bike lanes, landscape areas, street furniture, tree canopy, sidewalk. Again, those are about half of the orchestra, all things that we're responsible for. So the other half of the orchestra, right? What's that? Through the zoning, some of the instruments that we can tune are grade changes and setbacks, floor height, fenestration, transparency, sill height, and landscaping, just to name a few. And all of these components comprise the seam between public and private spaces and help to create those transition spaces we just talked about. And the result is an orchestra that plays beautiful music, hopefully, if you've aligned everything correctly. And an urban environment that is walkable, safe, and comfortable. And the perception is good as well. So we have here, everybody knows the sizzle pie. It's a commercial use, direct accessibility, and a generous ceiling height. Works quite well, lovely. That works well. This also, Marion Apartments, they do a shared lobby. The shared lobby and the units create that transition space here. Now I found this building in Portland, I think it was. It's a residential building, and you'll see here that they attempted to create a transition space, but the unit entries are level with the sidewalk. So we get that uncomfortable condition that we're all familiar with, right? And you can even see it here. It's a beautiful day in this photo. There's like one person walking about, all the blinds are closed. You know, this isn't performing, I think, to its highest standard. But this is another building in Portland, and I particularly like this example because the entries create, you know, lovely usable transition spaces, while the building itself, the massing holds the sidewalk edge. It did a really good job of accomplishing both. So that's that. Thank you very much, and I'll hand this back to Terry.
Thank you, Chad. Mayor and Council, we look forward to your discussion and questions about what we just looked at. But first, here are the corridors again. I just wanted to quickly remind you that right now, thanks to a Federal Transit Administration grant, staff, the community, and a team of consultants are thoughtfully addressing how to create walkable compact development through the River Road Corridor Study. Here are some images from that work. The corridor study is looking to support future MX service, mixed-use commercial neighborhood centers, and corridor housing, among other things. Here you can see the corridor study boundary on the map and some illustrations of standards being looked at for a variety of development aspects. It's a complex undertaking to develop a corridor code that supports a vision of walkable mixed-use development at a neighborhood scale. But that is the goal here, along with taking pieces of this corridor code and applying it later to other streets in Eugene where it may make sense. Some of the standards being developed include density standards or dwelling units per acre, along with standards that regulate form, including building height, setbacks, building length, coverage, massing, articulation, materials, active frontage requirements, and transitions to adjacent properties. The code is looking at these things comprehensively in order to set up the best possible regulatory framework to lead to implementation of the corridor vision. So with the information we've briefly presented to you today, our recommendation is to complete the work being done in River Road and move forward with a code amendment process for the downtown and nearby areas of Franklin Boulevard. The downtown deserves its own set of regulations due to the unique characteristics of the area, and we have the capacity to take on this piece along with other in-process high priority work. If directed to do so, we will begin the process of developing code amendments that will move our built environment closer to our aspirational vision. Next steps include developing a public outreach strategy and then moving into technical analysis and code writing. The public process includes cycles of review with the community, Planning Commission, and Council before the adoption hearings. And we would like to bring you an update on possible code concepts by the end of this calendar year. Thank you again, and we look forward to your discussion.
Great, thank you very much. It's interesting to see the slides, and I'm looking to see if I have counselors who have raised a hand. And I see that Chris is up first, so take it away, Chris.
Yeah, thanks. This is really great work. I appreciate it enormously, and I agree completely with the whole notion of private space and public space and how do you make a good transition. It's like the old thing about personal space. Is it 3 feet from you? Is it 6 inches from you? Buildings have the same as human personal space, so we need to take that into account. The one element I would want to make sure is integrated into this as we look at these transitional spaces is to make sure that we incorporate the ADA and accessibility aspect to it. Particularly if, as you had in many of your illustrations, you had stairs or some sort of a level change in order to address the transition space. I think that's great for creating a sense of transition space, works really well. And I think it's absolutely possible as you work on these transitions to make sure that there is built into them the standards for ADA accessibility, whether it's a ramp or whether it's some way that people can still get into the building. they're not exclusive at all, but it does require forethought in order to make sure that you build it in. So great work. I really, really appreciate what you've done. And I think it's extremely suitable to where Eugene wants to go. So yeah, I mean, if buildings have personal space, we want to make sure that we're at the right balance. So my hat's off to you. Thank you.
Hey, Alan, and then Claire.
Yeah, hi. Great end goal. I like the pictures. Agree with what Chris said. Couple of things. One, I brought this work session up 4 years ago. And this process kind of kicks the can down the road another couple of years. So we are not addressing my initial concern. And I sent out an email to council earlier today with the same picture that I took 4 years ago, which still exists, which is on the side on the 11th Street side of Capstone, where we had residential right up to the sidewalk, and then short, not very wide sidewalk, and then the street. And my concern is, and I expressed the same concern in 2017, is that we're not addressing that. And we're still not addressing that. So while I like the whole end game of this, it's going to take too long. And I think we need to do something in the interim. And I was talking to the mayor today, and one of the things she said very eloquently was when we were having conversations that we kind of have this backwards in terms of what we want to see. Our default is that you get to build right up to the sidewalk. And instead, the default should be a setback and all those pretty pictures that we saw. But that's not our code today. So instead of that default policy that allows no setbacks, we should have a policy that requires setbacks unless there's a good reason not to do it or some other mitigating circumstance. So those are some of the certain circumstances that I was talking about. And I put together an interim measure that would go along to supplement this staff recommendation for the process to guarantee that we don't see another capstone while we're waiting. And so this is my attempt at open to modifications to it to make it clearer or better, but it is an attempt to have a process whereby we change our default policy from no commercial setbacks to one that instead sets a city policy that reflects that commercial setbacks will be required with planter strips and all those nice things that we saw, but allows for a process to get a waiver from that under certain circumstances where those types of things are warranted. So it doesn't prevent us from doing things and moving forward, but in the interim, it protects us. And that's what I was getting at 4 years ago. I still believe that that's where we should be going. And I have a motion to put forward in due course.
Manager, did you want to comment on that?
Well, I was just going to say at some point, I know that Denny and Alyssa have had a chance to read through that, and they may, one of the things about Zoom that's really awkward is I can't just like turn and be like, do you want to say something now? So I just want to invite Denny at some point, if you want to address any of this, that you get a chance to do that, just sort of uncover your face. And
I'll jump in right now, Sarah, because I think, yes, this has taken a long time and we own all of that. We have done a lot of work, and maybe Alyssa and Terry could elaborate on the public realm side of this, because as Chad pointed out, there's 2 points of that experience. One is the public right of way, and the other half is what happens in the private side. We have been doing a lot of work downtown on the street design standards for downtown. And the private side, the setback side, if you want to think about it like that, is the other half of that work. And part of our recommendation was really to, for lack of a better term, finish that work and to really focus then now on the private side of that work, because we have done some work downtown on the right-of-way side. And The capstone on 13th experience is not just about the building. The street is really wide. The sidewalk is really narrow. There's no planting strip, which is all a right-of-way issue. It's a street design issue, not necessarily a building. So we need to work on both of those, and we have done work downtown, and we would like to finish that work. So again, that's part of our recommendation, but you're right, it has taken a long time.
Okay, Claire, and then Mike, and I see Greg.
Thank you. Thanks. I guess I was expecting a little bit more in terms of a proposal around what the possible code amendment would be, or perhaps, yeah. So I was just expecting more in terms of the staff presentation. And I'm a little confused about the discussion so far, but before I get to that piece. So at this point, the proposal for the pilot project, it wouldn't apply to the future riverfront development as far as I can tell. Is that correct?
That is correct, Councilor Charette. The riverfront area has a special overlay, so that would basically supersede anything else unless we wanted to do something different. But we've done a lot of work on the design standards and so forth through riverfront, so it does have an overlay to address a lot of the design issues.
So I wonder if there are elements within that special overlay that we would want to transpose to this pilot for downtown, if it's meeting some of those preferred design elements that Chad presented to us.
I think that's exactly, you asked, like, why don't we have more definitive recommendations? I think what we're asking for today is to initiate the process so that we could start working through various options for code amendments, and that we would bring those back. And again, Terry indicated our hope would be to bring those initial thoughts and options before the end of the year, and then we would basically start code writing and all of that as well. So it's a 6-month process, you know, at least I think most of the code amendments, Alyssa, you can fact check me on that, but I think we would be looking at at least a 6-month process, but it shouldn't be years. I know it's taken us years to get here, but it shouldn't be years. It should be 6 months or a little bit more is our estimate.
Yeah, and my recollection is that we have some in that overlay with the riverfront development. I think we have some really nice design elements that we're requiring there. And so I think, you know, my suggestion would be that would be a starting point. And then we're referring to these as commercial setbacks, but it seems to me in staff presentation kind of pointed to this, that a lot of the concern is really around those ground floor residential units that we might be wanting to build. So is it just terminology that requires us to refer to that as a commercial setback because it's an apartment building, perhaps? Can someone explain that to me?
Hi, Councilor Syrette. This is Alyssa Hanson, the planning director. And the reason it's called commercial setbacks, and somebody else can correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's because these properties are zoned with a commercial zoning. So they might be a residential use, and there might be a residential use on the ground floor, but the zoning is actually commercial. And Denny is right about the timing. I'll just jump in really quick about, you know, a standard surgical code amendment we can do in about 6 months. If it's, you know, depending on the amount of public input or interest, it can take a little bit longer than that. So that is spot on. I will say that the riverfront is actually its own special area zone. So it's not like our standard C2 community commercial or something. You all adopted a very special specific zone for the riverfront site.
Right, understood. Thank you. So I agree with a lot of what's said, both what Chris and Alan said, particularly for ground floor residential. There needs to be some separation. There needs, it just doesn't work well otherwise, as we know from personal experience. I don't know if it'll make you feel any better, Alan, but now there's a 2-way bike track in front of that ugly strip of pavement next to the capstone. And, you know, I definitely agree that, you know, the planter strips and that improve the look of things, but in terms of strictly commercial space, like a bank or some other commercial use downtown, I would worry that if we mandated there being a planter strip every single time, I mean, so maybe Alan's point of make it the standard and then people can apply for exceptions, would we be stealing away some viable commercial space that would otherwise be used for the interior of the building? So that's just where my thoughts are on that piece. So thanks very much.
Okay, Mike and then Greg.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I guess I would echo a lot of what Claire just said, in that I agree with much of what's been said from the aesthetic point of view. That seems like a reasonable and attractive sort of goal to set. My questions would be of staff, I suppose, at whatever level this work was engaged. You talked about public process and you talked about public engagement early in the process. Talk to me, please, about the level of engagement for those who design and actually build and finance such buildings and such projects. What's your level of engagement with them with regard to the negative impacts or the potentially financially impactful parts of more open space in that regard?
Thanks for the question. Typically with a code amendment, we develop a list of stakeholders and then we reach out to all of those and gather input from a variety of perspectives. So that's what we did with Clear and Objective. In that case, housing developers, builders, designers, neighborhood folks. And in this case, we'd want to have commercial property owners, designers, people who
have we done it so far, or that's a future part of the work?
It has not been picked up yet. We would do that after initiation.
So when we're making decisions about moving forward or not moving forward with the direction of writing code and all the work that includes, we don't know if there's a fatal flaw in any of this in terms of the folks who would actually use the code to build things?
I'm not sure I understand the question completely. We want to get the input up front while we're gathering sort of issues and opinions about the work that's about to be undertaken. We do that on the front end and then allow opportunities throughout the code writing and review processes.
So the process where people would actually use this code to build things, those folks will be consulted as you're going or after you're done?
As we're going.
Okay, okay. That's the important piece to me, because I agree, again, with much of what's been said, but that's purely aspirational from a how does it look and how does it feel perspective, and doesn't take into account, we could design, a football field in front of these places about the amount of space we'd like to see because it'd be more comfortable. But if no one ever actually builds something as a result of that because it doesn't pencil out, then we've defeated our own process. So I just want to make sure the process is in line with ensuring we're creating plans that will actually have the possibility of being built. Thank you.
Okay, Greg.
So isn't this the code that resulted in the lack of setback on the Applebee's situation down West 11th? Is that what we ended up having?
Yep.
It's true that Applebee's on West 11th is zoned C2, community commercial, where the standard is 0 to 10 feet.
So that's how we ended up with no setbacks, just like we had with the Capstone situation, right? So we need to fix this. So, but my question is, how do we change the code to fix it? I mean, I think isn't that what you were trying to get at, Alan? Okay.
I guess I will just say what I think I've heard so far is from a planning perspective, from a staff perspective, we know that, you know, that sort of one size fits all doesn't work, which is why we ended up with the Applebee's situation. So the desire is really to look sort of corridor by corridor. And what I'm hearing Alan say is he probably agrees that it's a corridor by corridor discussion, but because of the amount of time, he's looking for something that just sort of changes, like immediately puts into place a setback unless somebody can show why they don't need one in this waiting place, is what I'm sort of hearing is the discussion.
And Sarah, I think it would be helpful to maybe get Councilor Zelinka, if you could help us a little bit. Are we talking about throughout the city or on corridors or for buildings of a certain height, or what's our target as far as the outcome that we're trying to avoid? Because that would help a lot as we go into this.
Alan, go ahead and respond to that, if you would.
So, you know, when I look at a city and I look at downtowns and I look at corridors, the ones that are really appealing and enticing to me have planter strips and setbacks and trees and different kinds of forms on the buildings and all the things that we've been talking about. Our current code allows them to just do the capstone thing and smack it up against the sidewalk. And I think that we've got the policy by the default policy backwards. It should be a setback, and so then we would have, and then with with exceptions. So the policy where we got Applebee's, the policy where we got Capstone, the policy where we just inflicted on the boutique hotel on Franklin, which is right up against the sidewalk on Franklin. It's the only street that's not set, or only building not set back on that whole street for blocks. So it just incredibly decreased the flexibility of what we can do in that street as well. And so I totally agree that one size fits all is not the right approach. I've always said that about neighborhood livability requirements as well. So my suggestion is citywide, flip the default to we want to have setbacks and then build and define the exceptions. There are certain places, Claire mentioned one, you know, maybe a bank downtown as valuable real estate that they want that to be right out in front. Right up to the sidewalk, and that makes sense. So we should be able to define those exceptions as opposed to have our default be that as the way that we proceed. So that's my proposal, and that's what I think we should be doing. As to Denny's question, I think it merits a lot of thought and discussion about what those exceptions are and how you do them, and where is it appropriate, and where is it not. But I don't think the default should be no setback. It's ugly.
Okay, so I now have Mike and Chris for second rounds.
Thank you, Mayor. I tend to agree with Alan on the default setting. Painful to say that, of course, but I tend to agree with Alan on this.
That's like 5 in a row, Mike.
I know. I don't know what to make of it. Betty, I need you to chime in here at some point. The question I would have for staff is a little aside of this. There's a fairly massive change taking place in commercial space. There's a fairly significant decrease in demand. What is that change in the demand and use of commercial space playing in the process of code writing at this point? I mean, in your heads, you know?
I think that's a great question. What we've heard so far from our economists is that we know there are short-term impacts and nobody knows what the long-term impacts are yet. So we're tracking it, and we'll certainly ask those in the commercial development and office and real estate fields what they think about that.
That's why I brought up the previous question too. I don't know my picture on there, sorry. I mean, I won't ask my colleagues for a show of hands, but I'm pretty sure that the process of purchasing things online has grown amongst all of us over time, as opposed to purchasing things in physical spaces. And I know that over time, I mean, at least from the people I work with frequently, I know that that's going to become an issue. And so I'm hearing you say we kind of recognize that's going on, but there's no definitive way you would talk about how you are going to treat that with code. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I definitely think it's an issue we need to address as we work our way through this.
Okay.
I think, and Mike, I don't know that the current situation we're in has had that big of an impact in terms of the real estate market. The commercial real estate market, as I understand it, is still very, very tight.
My understanding of that is different, but I hear what you're saying. So, and I think all of the indicators point towards less demand over time. Would you say that's true or not true?
This is a good example of why what you said earlier of bringing people in at the early end of this process to understand like where we're going with this and what are the pitfalls and possible opportunities is a good first step, because I'm just basing it on a very small sliver of information.
Yeah, me too. So I hope we'll get more robust in our engagement in that process. Thank you.
Okay, I have Betty for a first round, and then Chris, I'll come to you for a second.
Thank you. I'm glad that Greg mentioned Applebee's. I was going to bring that up too. That's a case where I think they were told they were supposed to build up to the street, and then they were told that they shouldn't be there. And I think it points out that whatever we do, we should think of what might happen in the future. And will this be okay in a few years from now if we do this? And I think that we don't think that way. Too often we don't think that way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chris.
Actually, that was a little bit of a lead into what I was going to talk about, which is kind of a variation on the fast, cheaper, right. And I think the fact that we had a building code that required buildings to build right up to practically the street was put in place because you were trying to solve problem A, but because it was kind of put into place, nobody thought about the potential for problem B, C, D, and E. And if you look across the street from Applebee's, where what is now the St. Vincent de Paul building is, there's those two buildings right on the sidewalk that they were required to build because they wanted to build their original building back. And they said, you can't do that. You have to be right up to the street. So they put these two ridiculous buildings right on the street. And so when we were talking to MX, we not only had an Applebee's problem, we also had a Home Depot problem on the other side. And that was done years ago, and it was done with good intention. But the point is, you have good intentions for solving problem A, but sometimes you don't even know you've got problem B, C, D, and E until they occur. And with regard to swapping the current standard with the setback standard, I'm supportive of that. I'm absolutely supportive. And if I understand what Alyssa is saying, just that one change could take 6 months to do. Or maybe it was Denny. Just swapping them would take at least 6 months. So you've swapped it. So now you've changed it so that now you can set back and you can add another 10 feet, another 15 feet. But if you build capstone just set back 10 feet, you haven't solved a lot. So what are you going to do in that extra setback that you've created? So if you just say, we're going to swap them, so now you have to set back unless you give me a reason why, you still haven't defined what happens within that setback. Is it planter boxes or is it not planter boxes? Is it elevated or is it not elevated? Or do you just have 10 more feet of sidewalk and then you have a big ugly wall? So I think we need to invest some thought into swapping them, absolutely. And as soon as we can do that, but I don't want to just do it without some thought about what the consequences are for B, C, D, and E that are also going to happen as a result of doing that, because that's going to be a factor as well. So if you need 6 months to initiate a process to change that or to do the swap, what can you do in that amount of time to at least bring us some ideas about what you can do within that additional setback once we've made that the standard? I'm not saying we shouldn't create a standard of more setback. We should, but I'm very concerned that we don't have any idea what we're going to do in that additional setback that's not going to be just as ugly as what we have now. So I want to see some effort put into that as well.
Mayor, I just want to, can I just do a quick clarification and also say something? So I just want to clarify, Alyssa and Denny, I don't think you were suggesting that a citywide, were you saying that a citywide swap would be a 6-month process, or a pretty tight pilot around downtown was 6 months? Can you clarify that?
I can clarify. Yeah, the 6 month is the minimum a code amendment process would take for a surgical fix that had, you know, a decent level of support. If we're doing something that affects a large number of properties and is more complicated, it's certainly going to take longer than 6 months.
Okay.
And with
That's helpful. Thank you. That's good.
I wanted to just, and I also want to be just really thoughtful about both what you're trying to accomplish, Councilor Zelenka, and Council's time. And I have this lingering fear of a little bit of what happened with the short-term rental conversation, where it seemed like we were moving down a road and then you just heard from so many people that they weren't happy with the direction. And I wonder whether we want to take a brief interim step in the next couple of weeks to convene maybe some of those commercial realtors and experts that understand what the implications of this might be, or do you want to just put your motion on the table and move forward? I just want to throw that out as a possibility.
Alan, before you answer, I wanted to chime in a little bit also, which is I think the part of the challenge is just sort of the sequence of the work that you have ongoing around what's happening in downtown and along Franklin, and then this proposal sort of relates to the ongoing work, the level to which does it complicate it? Does it complement it? So I'm looking also for some clarity around, as planners, how would you sequence this out? I think if I could just, and other councilors can correct me if I'm hearing them wrong, but I think we all share a little bit of anxiety that if we take a long time, that we will have more Applebee's and more capstones because we won't have changed the code yet. And even though we're now in a recession and maybe there's not a lot happening, but if there is a lot happening, we're apprehensive about not having some way of sort of managing this in a reasonable amount of time. So the two things, wanting to respect the sequence and the process of the work that's ongoing with downtown, and also wanting to make sure that we don't, get involved in something that is still going to take us 3 years to resolve. And in the meantime, we have more of these challenges of people building right up to the sidewalk, because that's what the code says. So, Alan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mayor. So what I'm understanding is the process that I suggested in my motion would be a code amendment, and it could be a surgical code amendment. So involved in that process, and maybe you can go through the sketch of how that process works, because it does include public involvement and public input into the process. It's a matter of getting it started, and then all that stuff gets triggered. So the longer we wait to get that triggered, the longer it takes to do this. So we, in the end, could decide not to do it if that's what we end up deciding after an enormous amount of public input. But this motion is basically set the motion process to swap the default policy and then figure out what the exceptions are. And if I were to ask local commercial developers and real estate folks, and if I were in their shoes, I'd say, well, it depends. Is it just a blanket thing, or is there exceptions to it? And how does it impact this particular lot, that particular lot? And so that's why I didn't write this motion as a blanket swap. It's a swap default position with defining the exceptions or under the circumstances. So those need to be defined, but we need to start that process in order to move forward. So and all the things that Chris were talking about, absolutely. That's kind of the slides that we were seeing earlier. That's kind of step 2 of this process, I think. It's, you know, what happens on the other side of the right of way. And that takes a lot longer. What I was trying to get at was exactly what several counselors and the mayor have talked about, which is, let's not get another Applebee's. Let's not get another Capstone. Let's not get another Franklin. And in the interim, let's do that as fast as possible. I started this process 4 years ago. And so let's move forward on that and move into the public involvement process to do that default swap and define the exceptions.
Councilor Zelinka, if you don't mind me asking, I just have a couple of quick questions. So I think so we can make sure that we're following what you understand. So you are asking for a code amendment, not a change to policy, I think is what I'm understanding. I mean, you're asking for a regulation.
Well, I mean, maybe you can help me define what the difference is.
Okay. I think you want it to be in the land use code, not just in our comprehensive plan. I think you're looking for a land use regulation that would apply at the time of development. Okay.
Yeah, and that would involve a code amendment, as I understand.
Yes, correct. Okay. I'm looking at the language of your motion, so I want to understand what we're trying to achieve. My other question, are you wanting it, so I know we talked about, Councilor Syret had a question about what is a commercial setback. And so I just want to clarify that you mean for commercially zoned properties citywide, or were you,
yes.
Did you want to, okay. And then-
Because Applebee's and Franklin are not downtown.
Correct. And then also, I do want to point out that some of the examples downtown that are cherished by people, actually like the Sizzle Pie, I'm not sure if you want that to be a baked in exception, that those properties downtown, maybe along Broadway or within the heart of downtown, don't need to be set back X number of feet with also have landscaping. So want to check on that.
I wasn't thinking I would come up with the laundry list of all the exceptions. I think that takes a lot of smart people to think about it for a while and some public input into that process. So that's why I wrote in this exception for a waiver to that process. So in some cases, you know, if you have a 12-foot sidewalk with trees on the outside, that might be totally appropriate to put the building right up to the sidewalk. But our code isn't that specific.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is because the process that we have, it's called an adjustment review, and I won't get into a lot of details other than it is a discretionary process, meaning it's an appealable process, and sometimes that's a deterrent for property owners. So there may be some unintended consequences there, but I think that's something we can look at as we, you know, draft up the code. Maybe there's some hard exceptions as opposed to things, and also things that would go through this other exception process. So I just wanted to be able to clarify that with you. So thank you. And then just in terms of
the city managers working on, our city attorneys working on some language.
Yeah, we work closely with them on amendments. And then just for everybody's sake, an initiation really is the first step for us to start working on a code amendment. And so that's what the motion that we provided for tonight is that first step to get the ball rolling. And then, you know, there's a formal adoption process I think you're familiar with. We have to notify the state. There's planning commission public hearing and recommendation. There's city council hearing and action. But before we actually write the code, you know, we start drafting some concepts, and then that's when we start checking in with stakeholders. And there'll be a wide variety of folks. In this case, we're probably not required to notify the property owners, but we want to make sure that, you know, folks know about this. So thank you.
So Councilor Zelinka, I am, as you all are talking, I'm taking what your change was and I'm trying to mesh it with the initiation of a code amendment. I'm working on that now. I can email that to you, or I can read it when the time comes, whichever you prefer.
Reading it's probably, why don't you do both?
Okay. Okay. I'm writing and typing at the same time. So I will, if you're ready for it now, I can go, or if there's more discussion to be had.
The city manager sort of put it on the table around whether people want the staff to have a little time to talk about this with some commercial real estate, whether there's insights there. I don't know whether there's a concern about, again, to speak of unintended consequences of things where we haven't seen the consequence B, C, and D. So I don't know whether council wants to give a little time for that, or we're just.
Well, this process bakes that in, Mayor,
Okay.
by starting it.
Okay. So Catherine, I think you're up.
Okay, I'll just read it because I'm working off of Councilor Zelenka, what you sent out. So the way I think I've made it work, it would be, I move to initiate a code amendment to change the default allowing for no commercial setbacks and sets the default to require commercial setbacks with a planter strip. The amendment should allow for a process to obtain an exception for a no commercial setbacks and building up to the sidewalk in certain circumstances to be enumerated in the code.
Okay, I'm letting everyone ponder that. I have Jennifer and Claire in the queue. Jennifer, take it away.
I'm going to put it in the chat.
Thank you. So I hate to admit this, but I am somewhat confused about what is going on here. So is it my understanding that initially we were potentially initiating a land use code amendment process that you were anticipating to take about a year-ish, and that Alan is suggesting a similar process, but is more specific about what he wants? Is that the process to end with? Or am I completely not understanding what's going on?
You know what would be really helpful would be if Alyssa could tell you what she thinks she's gotten from this, since ultimately that's where, or Denny, one of the two of you. I know what I've heard from it. It's a little bit different than what you've said.
Okay.
Yeah, so the recommended motion was to do a code amendment for downtown only and use that as a pilot project, and to look at a number of tools, not just setbacks, but other tools to address, how you feel and what it looks like as you walk along the street. And so that was the staff recommendation, city manager recommendation, and that could take up to a year. And then the plan would be from there on out is to continue along other major corridors. Also, River Road would be ongoing. We've got other work downtown and on Franklin that are going on. My understanding of Councilor Zelenka's motion is that it would be a more surgical fix that would apply citywide, that would require, instead of right now, you can be 0 to 15 feet. So people actually have a choice for their setback in commercial. They're not required to be 0, but they often choose to be, as you can tell by the examples you've talked about. And so what the motion would do, if passed, would establish a setback and then require landscaping between the building and the right of way or the property line.
But allow for people to, so instead of it being an exception, the exception's the opposite. So it's a citywide, all commercial properties have a baked in setback unless we approve them to come up to the sidewalk.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And okay. So we would not be doing both. We would be doing one or the other.
Yeah, we're doing, I don't know what your answer to that is. I don't know how we would do both at the same time. So I think we'd have to delay.
We could not do them both at the same time, given the number of projects we're working on. We would have to postpone the recommendation that's in the agenda item summary.
Yeah, I think I agree with Alyssa. This is a pivot. I think we've turned kind of what we proposed today into a little bit different path. But I think to simplify it a little bit, I think all of our objectives are the same. Mm-hmm. We want to have people build in a way that creates a very walkable, comfortable, generous walking path that's a great experience. And, we've all had that great experience when we walked out those streets. That could be accomplished by a generous sidewalk that's already there, like Broadway. And if that case, maybe it makes sense to build to the property line. In cases where the right of way is wider or the sidewalk's narrower, then it's probably going to make sense to set those buildings back. But our objective is the same in both of those, is to have a very walkable, generous, comfortable place that is well designed from the street design and the building design, and have those work together. So I think we're all on the same page. The path is just a little bit different, but I think the objective is the same as far as how we're going to, what the end goal is.
Great, that's very helpful. I just want to make sure I fully understand what I'm voting for. So I appreciate that clarification.
I did put what I read into the chat function.
All right, Claire and then Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think I appreciate Denny's comments that made me feel a little bit better about potentially supporting Alan's motion, which still needs to be moved and seconded. Because I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think probably a lot of people would still want to see those other aspects considered. So not just a planting strip, but what are other ways that those concepts can be achieved. And so I wouldn't want to totally lose sight of staff's recommendation in terms of what you had in mind for a pilot project, recognizing the scope of work, can't get so huge. So I don't know if that, if there's a practical way to do that. I would also, welcome staff's recommendation around particular streets, such as, you were citing Broadway, that might not be the default, that they have to be set back and have a planter strip because of that wider comfort zone. And then I'm wondering, and I'm sure Terry is too, how this would dovetail with the current work happening with River Road Santa Clara. But I did want to offer, and I think this speaks to kind of Alan's sense of urgency. So I've been seeing the Gordon Hotel and the shops go up there, and they look great, but they are right on the sidewalk on 6th. There's no setback. And so you've got, a beautiful brick facade, a sidewalk, a kind of, I think, a typical sidewalk, and then traffic zooming by. It's not really going to create a great walking space on the outside of that building the way it is right now. And so, we have permits that are going in all the time for building to our current code, and we may not be getting results that we want out of that. And I think that speaks to the sense of urgency that Alan's trying to bring here.
Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Two things. One was staff wanting to develop an example area. Why downtown is the choice, for example, as opposed to River Road or, 99 or whatever? Why downtown is the choice of the first place to test it?
I'll answer that, or I'll take a shot at it. We've already started doing a lot of work on the street design standards downtown. So again, looking at the other part of that is what gets built along the street to kind of bring those two pieces of work together to finish that. Similar to what we're doing in River Road, we're really looking at the streets, street design, how they interface with the buildings on the street and how the buildings interface with the neighborhood and all those kinds of things. So our thought process was really to kind of finish downtown and finish River Road and then use what we learned from those and to kind of build it out throughout the city. So we'll learn a lot through that process and we can replicate that once we kind of have a good boilerplate that we can use going forward. That was our thought process, if that's what your question is.
Yeah, it was. And I see the wisdom of that. Moving quickly brought us to a place where we have the examples that were listed previously of things we don't like and the unintended consequences that came with those. So I'm aware of the wisdom of trying this in bite-sized pieces I also understand Alan's point of view about the default setting. And I don't disagree with that, but the challenge I'm having with voting on it right now is that I don't know the unintended consequences. And so I don't know if there are some. And I recognize that with 6 months to a year, we have some time to discover those. But I wonder if staff might chime in and tell me if you think that we are likely to discover some going citywide with that as the default setting. Will there be commercial space property owners that have objection for some reason? Will there be a negative consequence from us doing it on that large of a scale that you can see or potentially see?
That's a really good question. I think, you know, as we go through this, we don't want to create a whole bunch of barriers that is going to make it harder, particularly on goals around housing. So, for example, if the Woolworth building would have been a housing project and we said you have to set it back 10 feet, that probably means you would have lost 15 or 20 units and then you wouldn't have been able to build it because it wouldn't pencil out. So that's not an objective we want to achieve at this point. So I think we will definitely be thoughtful during this 6 months to try to figure out where it makes sense, where is it needed, where we need to be flexible and creative and all of those things. And it's very surgical. It's not really a blunt instrument kind of exercise because we have to get it right. And I think your anxiety is you wanting to get it right, just like we feel the same way. So we'll try to be as thoughtful and as surgical as we can because it's really important that we don't have those unintended consequences.
Thanks, sir. I want to think a little bit more here for another couple of minutes, but I may be willing to support Alan's motion once made. I'm just really nervous about the fact that we have such a large alteration in direction that I have no clue what the consequences are. I don't like making decisions that way. I'd like to have at least some better idea and input from others about what the consequences may be. So I'm not sure on this yet, but again, there's enough time that we can alter, it seems. Is that, Denny, Alyssa, is that do you suspect that as well, that there's enough time here to alter direction if there's some issues?
And I think it's pretty safe to say if we head down a path that there's a lot of pushback and a lot of concern from property owners, we're going to come back and we'll have discussions with council and we're going to check in, and we'd like to do that before the year end. We won't be through the code amendment by year end, but if we spend the next few months doing that due diligence work that you're talking about, Councilor Clark, what we would like to do is do a check-in and say, here's what we heard, here's where some things, some ideas where we think might advance all of our goals here, and then see where we're going. Because I don't know the answer to all the questions today until we really start talking to people and look at it a little bit more surgically.
I would support the motion on that basis, that there's a friendly amendment in it that says that assuming staff will check in with us before the end of the calendar with input from stakeholders.
That's baked into a code amendment process. I don't know that that's necessary to say that, but sure.
Thank you. That assumes that the staff has an affirmative obligation to check in with some folks as opposed to throwing it open and allowing people to come and talk to them about it. And that's different enough that it's meaningful to me. So I appreciate your willingness to consider that.
You can type it in. The motion hasn't been made yet.
So, Mike, just to clarify, so it would initiate the code amendment process, and as part of that process, the staff, in order to figure out what the exceptions would be, would have to go out and start talking to people, and you'd want them to come back to us before the end of the year with, here's what we found out so far. You're on mute, Mike.
I haven't done that for a while. Thanks. And it's because that's one of those things I would want to see us do first. That's why I'm saying end of calendar, to be able to say, this is input we've developed from those involved in the constructing and developing of such things. And if there aren't any issues, then we'll know that up front, and we can either solve them or we can just charge straight ahead and move faster. And I'm fine with that. That's the importance of the timing on that for me.
Okay, I have Emily, and then Alan wants to come back. So,
thank you, Mayor. If we did this just downtown and in River Road, and then decided we wanted to expand it citywide, would we be able to just have very quickly say add the rest of the city, or would we be going back to stage one of asking all these questions?
I believe
Start over.
Every street, every neighborhood, every experience is a little bit unique. So as Sarah mentioned at the beginning, the cookie cutter, just apply it to the rest of the city, doesn't necessarily resonate with me, and probably not with someone like Chad. Our intent would to be very, like we've done on River Road, to be very thoughtful, work with the neighborhood, look at that corridor. What are the goals for that corridor? You know, what happens when MX gets there, and be really thoughtful about all of those things and make this decisions and codified things that make sense for that corridor and neighborhood. So, you know, what's next and how we proceed next, I think we can answer that maybe when we learn a little bit more in the next 6 months and learn a bit more about River Road. So I'm not sure there's necessarily a cookie cut approach that we can just implement in the city. I don't know that that would be the best option.
I'm not sure that answered my question. If we went with the original idea of doing this downtown and maybe in River Road, and we took into all of the desires and what's possible for those two places, and it takes a year, and then we say out West 11th wants to build some stuff, how far back do they have to be? Do we have to start all the way over again and do all this community outreach and ask the builders and ask the people living there and take another year, as opposed to if we do it citywide, then it's done in a year. And then I guess we spend the rest of our lives undoing it where people are unhappy. So I'm a little confused.
My best attempt at answering that is, we want to make sure we get it right. So whatever it takes to make sure we get it right. If it's citywide, if it's neighborhood by neighborhood, we're going to do university neighborhood planning next, then we're going to do Bethel planning. And, you know, there's an opportunity for us to address all of these things as part of that planning, or we could do something more generous or citywide. The ultimate thing I think from us and my staff is that we want to get it right. And that's what we're going to have to figure out, is what gives us the best chance for success. So I'm not sure I can definitively say what is the exact right path today, but we'll learn a lot as we go through this.
I think the answer really is, you're initiating a code amendment for this piece. And if you initiated a code amendment for downtown, let's just say that one, when we finish that work, you would have to initiate a code amendment to apply that someplace else. And it might be quicker because we would have engaged a lot of the same people, like the same people that own property, the same builders and developers. We would know a lot. So it'd probably be a little bit quicker, but you're right, it would take some time. I was thinking, and maybe this just comes out as part of the process, that maybe one of the exceptions is, you know, when you finish the River Road Santa Clara, you know, plan and you have that corridor, are you then going to also make those property owners come through? Or are we just going to create, like, as a corridor has a plan that's adopted, that just replaces this? So that's all a lot of details we'll work out along the way.
So we have to do it, you know, area by area by area. It could take us 10 years. And in that meantime, people have built who knows what in the areas where we haven't put any rules in. You know, just efficiency wise, that doesn't seem so smart. On the other hand, I'm always saying it's not the same all across the city, and a cookie cutter approach isn't a good idea. So I'm really confused as to which way to go. I wanted to get going. I wanted to start. But I'm, as much as I like individuality, I don't want to take 10 years and have more capstones around. The Woolworth building, I think, is interesting. If it had been housing, it feels to me like it would have an entrance, a lobby, and that would serve as your transition zone. And then above, it would come to the edge, but the first floor would be more open, even though it would be behind the wall. So I can see how it would be better in different places. I'm also wondering if you had a setback on the ground level, then would it be okay to come up, and have the second floor use some of that space? Anyway, those are my thoughts. I'm a little confused, but I want to not have capstone. Thank you.
Okay, I have Alan and Mike. So Alan, I don't know if you want to, are you wanting to put a motion on the table at this point?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One, this is not a blanket policy. It does provide for exceptions. What those exceptions are, we need to figure out with public input and comment, and we need to be thoughtful about it. So this is not setting the policy today. This is starting the process to set the policy. So Emily, your concerns about what are how we're going to do this, and Mike's concerns about unintended consequences get fleshed out as we go through a code amendment process. That's why we have a code amendment process, to make sure that all those boxes get checked. So, and that we do think about the unintended consequences, and in the end, we could change the scope of it if we chose to do that after we get some learning. But I think you're absolutely right. In the meanwhile, Emily, we could get more Applebee's and more Franklin hotels and more capstones, because and if we took it piecemeal, it would take years to do that. And besides, staff was only proposing downtown, not downtown Everett. So my motion, I'll take what the city attorney put forward, but I would add a couple of things to it. One is a time consideration. So I would like to have it be completed within 6 months if possible. That's what staff said was potentially doable. And then Claire's concerned about, it's not just planter strips, it's other things you could add in with planter strips, other amenities or design elements as part of the motion. And then Mike's concern at the end, we would say, and staff will check back with council at the end of the year, reporting on feedback and potential exceptions or circumstances. So with that, I move to initiate a code amendment to change the default, allowing for no commercial setbacks, to require commercial setbacks with planter strips, other amenities and design elements to be completed within 6 months if possible. The code amendment should allow for adjustments or outright exceptions of no commercial setback and building up to the sidewalk in certain specific circumstances to be enumerated in the code, and staff will check back before the end of the year, providing reporting on feedback and potential exception circumstances.
Second.
All right, I have Mike and then Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I can support that motion. I would ask that staff consider another piece, and perhaps I'm uninformed about this, or less than fully informed, but my recollection is that even in downtown, we have some reasonably wide disparities in FAR standards. And so my question is, that as we're adding setbacks, I would want to know, at least in those areas where we get closer to a 2 or a, you know, something with regard to FAR, what are the impacts there? And what does that mean with regard to the impacts for potentially building? I mean, if we have a floor area ratio that says you got to build the thing 10 stories high now all of a sudden because we have a setback, that's the sort of thing where, you know, that's another element that I'd like to see us flush out and report back on. Because maybe we change the FAR in some places instead to make it more reasonable. I don't know. Denny, do you have thoughts on that? I can see you.
Keep it simple.
Alyssa can remind us what we've done with the floor area ratio, because we did adjust it years ago, but I can't remember exactly where it stands now.
There were some places where it's like 0.65 and there's other places where it's 2 or better, and all of which are kind of ad hoc downtown, depending on the street. That's my recollection. I could be wrong about that, but I remember the move to increase FAR in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I'm not sure where that stands and in which areas downtown specifically, but in other places as well.
Okay, Chris.
Just a point of note. I'm hearing Denny say that we want to make sure we do this right. And I'm hearing Alan say we want to do it fast, which means I am expecting, and we should expect as we vote on this, the city manager and the planning staff to come back to us and say, what additional cost will it take to meet that right and fast expectation? So I'm not going in, I will vote for it, but I am voting for it with the expectation it's going to cost, and it's going to cost in staff and it's going to cost in money. And I would like to know as soon as it's reasonable what this additional cost will be in order to meet this quality and speed timeline.
Okay, thank you. So we have, let's see, any other comments? Mike, did you need another one? Okay, go for it.
Just real quick, it seems to me as though planning has quite a number of items on their plate and less than adequate number of staff to do it. And some of them are pretty critically important. We started talking last week about urban reserves, and with regard to, you know, how much land we have for building housing, that's a critical need. And I'd rather see staff working on that than this. So maybe Denny, you can address the impacts of the workload we're putting on you with this and what will fall by the wayside. Thanks.
We can do that. We kind of had a scope for what we had proposed as kind of a pilot project, and we felt like we could do that within our current work plan. We're going to have to come and kind of circle back, and especially the public engagement aspect and all that, just kind of figure out what the scope is and how much time and how many people we're going to need. And we're happy to report on that. Without talking to Alyssa and her team about how we're going to squeeze this in, it's hard to say right now, but we can definitely do that.
Okay, ready for a vote? So all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand, your real hand or your virtual hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All 8 in favor. All right, none opposed, and that passes. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for that conversation. And we have overrun our second item completely. So city manager, I guess we'll have to reschedule that work session on the few.
Yeah. Catherine, I'm curious about that just in terms of the September timeline, because that was a contractual piece that we would agree to this in September. So we either, can we just sort of mutually agree to do it in October, or do we need to do it tonight at the end of the work session, at the end of the meeting?
You have Wednesday also as an option that's in September. Or we could do a 1 sentence. You can't do verbal amendments to a written contract, but you can, I could also
trying.
I'm not gonna let you do it. So we could do if we can't get it into tomorrow, or I'm sorry, Wednesday, I could write.
It's not going to happen on Wednesday. I mean, we're talking about downtown urban renewal and homelessness. And I think all three, those are big, all of them.
October, so moved.
Okay, I'm gonna write a one sentence amendment that will, Counselor Semple, you'll need to sign, and Sarah, you'll need to sign, that will bump this to October.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all. I will be back here at 7:30. Thanks so much.
Awesome.